Now we're to our last speaker in this section, and we're going to hear from a man who puts the law back in law and economics. We're going to hear from Professor Tom W. Bell of Chapman University School of Law about the legal framework for the special economic sea zone. Tom is probably the world's leading expert on special economic zones, and he has a book coming out in Cambridge University Press on the subject. And he's been working with us at the Seasteading Institution on the legal framework for many, many years, and we are really, really lucky to have someone of his expertise handling this angle of the project. In addition to being a professor at the Chapman University School of Law, where Tom focuses on high-tech and intellectual property law, he has also published papers on internet law, polycentric law, prediction markets, and the Third Amendment, which, for those of you who may not be so familiar with the American Constitution, that's about the quartering of soldiers, and as well as a book on copyright law. Tom is a true Renaissance man, and it's a pleasure to have him close out this segment. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Susanna. Your Honor, bonjour and hello. Excusez-moi, mais j'ai un grenouille dans la gorge. Heureusement, il s'appelle Barry White, so ça c'est chouette. I'm just apologizing to our French friends that I have a frog in my throat. Oh, I got my hands full. So I'd like today, I need my slide. I'd like today to describe to you in an overview form the legislative framework that we are tasked to offer to the government. The Seasteading Institute signed an agreement, of course, with French Polynesia in January, and we need to do an environmental impact statement. You've heard some things about that. We need to do an economic impact statement. We have experts working on that, and I'm helping them to draft legislation. We are to propose legislation to the government. Happily, parce que c'est bien compliqué, very complicated. En effet, il y a deux pays. There's in fact two countries we have to deal with, and forward more. Oh, other way. Merci. And so I'm going to give you an overview of this legislative framework. Happily, I don't have to tackle this alone. We have many great people on our team, most notably Nicolas Germano. He's helped us. And also we have a French firm, GB2A, which is helping us with the French law. So let's talk a little bit about, well, I don't need to say a lot about this because my friend Mark Lutter described to you this graph. This is forthcoming in my book, Your Next Government. It's coming out in the fall from Cambridge University Press, and it will describe the revolution that is transforming governments from the bottom up and the inside out all across the world. So look for that book, please. The only other thing I'll say about this, because Mark already offered it to you, is it's actually very conservative. This is an underestimate of the number of special economic zones that have been created. There's actually many more on some accountings. Here's a graph that Mark didn't get to. This shows the percentage of countries that have SEZs. And the interesting thing here is you can see it is rapidly approaching 100%, 100%. It is slightly leveling off because it's an S-shaped curve. Basically, almost every country in the world has some kind of special economic zone, including French Polynesia, it turns out. In the law, we don't really like originality. Lawyers like to do everything just a little bit different, if not the same as before. And it turns out that French Polynesia has also been working in this area. I can thank our friend Mark Collins for introducing me to your Law de Pays, your laws for ships like the Paul Gauguin. And as Philippe Lemonnier described, foreign flagged ships sail effectively under the laws of the country that issued their flag. The Paul Gauguin is flagged by, I believe it's Bermuda, and it sails your waters, bringing economic growth and introducing your lovely country to tourists, really under the laws of another country, and seems to work very well. The labor laws that apply on board are from that country. It does not pay customs and duties. What they do pay is a head tax on each tourist on the ship. So French Polynesia is being paid, in effect, to host these people in your waters, but without all the laws of French Polynesia applying. So that's an interesting example. French Polynesia came up with this on their own, and it seems to be working really well. We've also seen some pictures like this from Mark Lutter. I'll go through these quickly. They're wonderful pictures that show the power of special economic zones to create economic growth. So this is Hong Kong over 34 years. They've seen a lot of economic growth there. Over an even shorter time, Shenzhen, which is across the Pearl River Delta from Hong Kong, over 25 years. Mark gave us some wonderful descriptions of the economic growth there. And over an even shorter period of time, Dubai. There we go, Dubai, over 13 years. Now let me just take a moment here, since you've heard a lot about the economic growth that we hope to bring to your country, to assuage some concerns, which I understand. We've talked to some people from the Whenua who say, we don't want this in French Polynesia, that's too much. And I agree, I understand that, having visited your country now 2 times and swum in your waters and petted your stingrays and gotten a frog in my throat. I understand that, but the nice thing about the floating island project, from the point of view of people who are worried about too much economic growth too fast, is it gives you a way to control that. If the economic growth happens on a floating platform in a lagoon, it's not in your backyard, it's not on your land, it's somewhat removed, and that gives you more control. You don't have to let this happen. You can tailor it to what you want. It's like giving someone a very powerful engine, but you don't have to step on the gas. You'll have a steering wheel and a brake. So that's very nice for you. It lets you get exactly what you want. Let's also be clear, though, economic growth can be disruptive. But the things we've heard from you and the people in your communities are that you want some economic growth, of course, because your young people are leaving the country to pursue opportunities elsewhere. So you love your communities and your families, but they're being split apart by people who have to go abroad to find opportunities. This will give you a chance to let those children come home and develop your own economy. And yet, it doesn't have to look like a big city. You don't need that. You don't want that. You can have the beauty that you have protected, and yet bring some opportunities. There we go. Now, we've talked about some pretty simple economic zones. I want to just briefly point out that there are more advanced zones out there. This is an interesting example from Honduras. I've worked in Honduras with New Way and Mark Lutter. And I'll just say, if you're interested in how far special economic zones can go, take a look at this Honduran ZA program. I won't say much more now. It's in my book. And by the way, my book also discusses the adventures I've had here in French Polynesia. So you can read about yourselves there. This is the World Bank's Doing Business Index. They go around the world, they collect data, and they kind of issue a grade card to countries describing how well they're doing in allowing economic growth. It's a little faint here, but it turns out near the top there is Hong Kong. They are they're the 5th one down is Hong Kong. Mais où est la France? Where's France? It's very far down here, number 27. And we hope through this floating island project to help you do better than that. Because if you think about it, Hong Kong at number 4 is doing much better than China, which is actually not even on here. China's like at number 80. So as Hong Kong is to China, perhaps French Polynesia could be to France. And just between you and me, you could show France how to do it better. We'd love to help you do that. So let's describe in brief the sort of legislative framework that we plan to propose to the government. It's a 2-stage project. It begins on the land and then goes to sea. The first stage will be on the land. We call this the anchor zone because having a ship alone is not enough. You need an anchor because you need to stop sometimes. You need to moor. And our anchor zone will be very small, but it's a way to get started. We need a place to develop the technologies that we want to put in the lagoons. And this is quite conventional. Land-based zones are everywhere, and you have those, by the way, in French Polynesia too. There have been 3 resort complexes approved under a legislative framework you've already put in place. And basically, these development areas don't pay customs and duties on the materials they ship in to build their resorts. There's also an aquaculture project in Hoa, which is on the water in part. I don't think we have anything to teach French Polynesia. You figured this out on your own. We're just here to help you take it the next step. Phase 2 will get us out on the water, where we really want to be. That's what seasteaders are all about. And that is where the real action will take place, not immediately in your backyard, but in, we hope, very attractive and lovely and environmentally sensitive floating islands. You might think of this a little bit like the traditional anchor, the tutau, which is used with the va'a. And that's the way the anchor zone will be related to the floating zone. This isn't really to scale, though. Really, in the real world, the anchor is a very small thing relative to the ship. And that, too, will be the case here in French Polynesia. The anchor zone on land will be very small. It's the first step. The real action, the growth, will happen offshore. And if it works, we can have more than one of these. As Mr. Pittman described, it is really the nature, I think, of Polynesians to adventure, to be on the oceans. And really, I'm just a lawyer and an academic, but even a lawyer and an academic can dream. And I'm so impressed with the history of the Polynesians that if they want to, I want to give them a chance. Everyone at the Seasteading Institute and Blue Frontiers wants to give them a chance to get back out there. We need to get the world's first and foremost explorers back out there, really taking over the world. And with these floating zones, we hope you'll be able to do that. So with that, I will wrap up and say, there it is, maruru, I'm trying to get to it, maruru, merci, and thank you.